Hello again, folks. Very nice to be with you. I say with in inverted commas because once again we're having to do it this way. But lovely to be able to share with you, even if it is remotely. You'll be aware, I'm sure, that this is the last Sunday before Advent. It is also, therefore, the festival of Christ the King. And we, as subjects of the King, rightfully ask, how may our King be served? What can we do to serve the King that is Christ? That, of course, is the whole of the Christian life. We spend our lives answering that question in whatever way we can, and there will be as many answers as there are Christians, because for all of us the answer will take a different practical form depending on what our life contains, because we can answer that question at work, in the home, wherever we are, whatever we are doing. But the undergirding principle of our response, the undergirding principle of our service to our King, has to be the principle of love, because that is what not just God calls us to, it is what God himself is. Love is his nature. And in coming to earth in the incarnate Christ, we rightly say that love came down. That wonderful Christmas hymn that we will doubtless be singing soon. Love came down at Christmas. And love becomes incarnate in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. What then does that actually mean? It's a phrase we use. What does it actually mean in real life? What does it mean for us when we say that love became incarnate? Love came down to share our life with us. Love is what we are called to. What form does that love take? And our gospel reading for today makes the answer to that pretty clear. This is the famous passage from Matthew 25. Jesus is still at this point in the temple courtyards teaching, and it's just prior to his arrest. And it's that moment where he is talking about his return. This is Matthew chapter 25, reading from verse 31. When the Son of Man comes as King, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his royal throne, and the people of all the nations will be gathered before him. Then he will divide them into two groups, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the righteous people on his right and the others on his left. Then the King will say to the people on his right, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, come and possess the kingdom which has been prepared for you ever since the creation of the world. I was hungry, and you fed me, thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you received me into your homes, naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me, in prison, and you visited me." And the righteous will then answer him, "When, Lord, did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we ever see you a stranger and welcome you in our homes, or naked and clothe you? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the King will reply, "I tell you, whenever you did this for one of the least important of these brothers of mine, you did it for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Away from me, you that are under God's curse. Away to the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, but you would not feed me, thirsty, but you would not give me a drink. I was a stranger, but you would not welcome me into your homes, naked, but you would not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, but you would not take care of me. Then they will answer him, When, Lord, did we ever see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and would not help you? And the king will reply, I tell you, whenever you refuse to help one of these least important ones, you refuse to help me. These then will be sent off to eternal punishment, but the righteous will go to eternal life. It seems clear, then, that our service of the King is the service of love, put into practical action for those who need us, and most particularly put into practical action for the most vulnerable, the most needy, the least of these my brothers, and of course sisters, as Jesus describes them. And it's to that kind of love in practical action that we are called. And I think this is something that we need to come back to again and again and again when we are talking about love, which of course is central to the gospel. Of course it's central to our knowledge of God. It's central to everything that we believe about God and that we believe about what we should be about. But what actually do we mean by this word love? And of course, in our society, love has come to mean very much an emotion, a way of feeling. If you talk about love, that's the first thing that I suppose any of us thinks of. It's about how we feel. Love is something that we feel. Well, not in the Gospels, it's not. Love in the Gospels is something that you do, not something that you feel. The Gospels, as I'm sure you know, were written originally in Greek. And the Greeks, being wise, had 4 different words for love. Because love, as you don't have to stop and think for very long to realise that love has to do an awful lot of work in our language and cover a whole multitude of things. But the Greeks had 4 different words. One for erotic love, eros, which was the love that contained sexual attraction, the love between a couple, for example. They had another one, philia, which is what we might want to call platonic love, the love you might feel for members of the family, for mother or father or children or something like that, which clearly is different to the love between a partnership. Then they had another word, storge, which, to simplify it slightly, I suppose we might describe as love of something like activities or things like that, as in, I love tennis, I love pizza, that sort of thing. By and large, you are not going to have the same kind of deep emotional attachment to pizza that you might to your partner. Although having seen the sixth form at work in my days at Trent College, I did rather wonder sometimes. And then they have this 4th word, agape, which gets translated as love in the New Testament, in the English version of the New Testament, but for which I suppose there's not sort of an immediately obvious English word. You could translate it as respect, actually, and that would fit in most of the categories in which it would appear, in most of the contexts in which it appears. We translate it as love, and that's fine so long as we understand that agape and the vast majority of the uses of the word love in the New Testament are translations of that word, translations of the word agape. So long as we understand that that has got nothing to do with feelings. It is about practical action. It's about how we treat one another. And obviously, if we're talking about people that we like, then so much the better. If we're not, well, too bad. We have to love them anyway in the agape sense. We are called to treat people equally and with equal concern and with equal love, whether we like them or not, which, let's face it, folks, is a challenge. but it's a challenge to which we are called. And it's because it's not an emotion that Jesus can command his disciples to love one another, as he does in John's Gospel at the Last Supper. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another. And of course, if love's about emotions, that statement makes no sense at all, because you can't command emotions. You can't command somebody to feel a particular way, but you can command them to act in a certain way towards each other and towards others. You can command them to act with concern and respect and a real practical concern towards one another, irrespective of what the feelings might be. So love by all means, but let's understand what sort of love we're talking about and what the Greek word actually means. And clearly that's the kind of love in action that Jesus looks for in his followers, as he makes clear in the gospel passage. And it occurs to me that the sort of parallel passage to this one is the parable of the Good Samaritan, which you'll find in Luke chapter 10, if you want to read it again. For me, one of the greatest of the parables, not just because of its very clear message, identical to the message here, that what God wants is love in action, is actually practical caring and concern, not fine words, and certainly not, as in the parable of the Good Samaritan, an ignoring of the problem and a passing by on the other side. What's so delightful, of course, about the parable of the Good Samaritan is that the person who stops and helps is a heretic. The Samaritans, to us it's a good word, the Samaritans are those nice people on the end of a telephone who will listen to you at any time of day or night. Not to a Jewish audience they weren't. They were the renegades, they were the black sheep, they were the ones who had left the true path of the Jewish law and had sort of blended with society and intermarried with local people and done all sorts of things that they shouldn't do. And the Jews of Judea utterly despised those who lived in Samaria. And so Jesus very deliberately picks somebody who really, there was a sharp intake of breath when he said it was a Samaritan who stopped and helped. He's being deliberately provocative. And if we were wanting to retell that parable today, it would be the parable of insert here the name of the person you would either least expect to stop and help, or that you might least want to stop and help you. And then you get the idea of what Jesus is saying, that it doesn't actually matter who you are. It doesn't actually matter what doctrines you hold to. Now there's a revolutionary thought. What God is interested in is, does your love of him result in practical action towards those who need it? For those in whom it does, the message is clear. You are blessed of my Father. Come and inherit the kingdom. For those for whom it's all about words, or, who have diluted the message or distorted the message such that it does not result in care for the most needy, then the message is stark and distinctly scary. You are rejected. You are rejected by God. And we might come back and say, hey, wait a minute, what happened to salvation by faith? We believed, surely we're not justified by our works, we're justified by our faith. For which I send you back to the letter of James. By all means, we are saved by our faith. But if somebody's faith is real by the fruit that it produces, by the actions that it produces. So as we reflect today on Christ the King, and how we may serve him. The answer in one sense is very clear. We do whatever we can, whether it's through actions that we can take within our own community, or perhaps by charitable giving, which plays a very valuable part, of course. But anything that we can do in a practical way to help the needy, perhaps particularly in present circumstances, and particularly as Christmas approaches, anything along those lines, that is the service of God. That is the service that our King calls us to. God bless you. It's been great to share with you again.